He was just 15, but the kind of pain Leia Christian carried was the kind that haunts grown men for life. A child of chaos born into the wreckage of addiction, abandonment, and institutional failure. Leia was never handed a fair shot at life, but what started as a broken beginning spiraled into something far more devastating, something almost unspeakable. She cried out for help online, in therapy rooms, behind locked doors in group homes. She told anyone who would listen that she was hurting, that she was violated, that the people meant to protect her had failed. But the world moved on, just like it always does. And in the silence that followed, Leia began to disappear. Not all at once, but piece by piece. First came the bitterness, then the numbness, then came the pills. By the time the adults around her realized how far she had fallen, she was already reaching for something darker than pain. She was reaching for escape. But this story isn't just about depression or addiction. This story is about a system that looked the other way. It's about trauma passed down like a curse, and a young girl's final attempt to be heard before everything went black. On February 5th, 1999, Leia Christian was born into a storm. Her mother, Rachel Manzano, was struggling with addiction. Her father, Charles Christian, was already absent. Her very first breath marked the beginning of a fight for survival. As a toddler, Leia was placed into foster care, and for a time it looked like she might be okay. Her foster mother, Shalandri, gave her something she'd never known: stability, love, warmth. Leia was funny, bright, engaged at school. Her teachers at John Reith Elementary remembered her as quick-witted and full of potential. But life doesn't just let kids like Leia off the hook. By the time she hit adolescence, everything started to unravel again. Shalandri's health was declining, and so was the structure in Leia's life. Whether because of behavior problems or the strain of caregiving, or both, Leia was returned to state custody. She was transferred to a group home. And it was there, in that cold, silent system, that Leia says the real nightmares began. She claimed she was assaulted multiple times. She described the pain physical, emotional, spiritual. She said she screamed, but no one came. And in the echo of that trauma, Leia turned to the only coping mechanism she could find: social media rants, self-blame, and substances that made the noise in her head go quiet, at least for a while. She spoke often about her parents, the ones who were sometimes in her life, but never quite enough. She still had contact with her biological siblings, but it wasn't the same. Not when what she craved most was something whole: a family, safety, a reason to believe in tomorrow. Instead, she got emptiness, isolation, and a haunting sense that maybe she was better off not existing at all. She tried once to end the pain. She didn't succeed. But the scars weren't just on her arms. They were inside too, stitched deep into a mind that no longer felt safe in its own skin. How do you help a child who's already convinced the world has given up on her? And what happens when her story ends not with healing, but with silence? This is not just another case. This is not just another statistic. This is the unraveling of a young girl in real time as the world watches and shrugs. You're watching True Crimes Retells. If this story moves you, and it should take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think failed Leia the most, her parents, the foster system, or society's indifference? Because the truth is, it wasn't just one moment that broke her, it was death by 1,000 small abandonments. And by the time someone noticed, it was already too late. She was already drowning in pain, but the place meant to give her safety only pushed her deeper under. The group home where Leia Christian was placed wasn't just cold and impersonal, she believed it was dangerous. According to Leia, it wasn't simply neglect happening behind those doors. She said that abuse ran deeper than anyone wanted to admit, that illegal activity was routine, and mistreatment wasn't the exception. It was the norm. She tried to speak up, again and again, but it felt like screaming into a void. Her allegations were often brushed aside, ignored, or forgotten. Even when she cried out publicly on social media, in whispers to people she trusted, the system stayed silent. And silence is a killer. But despite the chaos closing in around her, Leia wasn't completely alone. Her former foster mother, Shalandri, still kept in touch. So did her biological parents, though their presence was scattered, imperfect. She had a few friends, some family, people who genuinely cared. But care isn't always enough to fill an emotional void, especially when trauma takes root early. That empty space inside her, the one shaped by abandonment, pain, and betrayal, never really left. Still, there was something about Leia that made her unforgettable. Even in her darkest seasons, she carried light. She smiled. She cracked jokes. She cared deeply for those around her. She was fiercely loyal, always putting others ahead of herself. Her nickname was Lie, and everyone who loved her said she lived up to it. Charismatic, lovable, with a kind of spirit that made you want to believe in better days. And for a little while, it seemed like those better days might finally come. Fast forward to 2018. Leia was 19 years old, and just when it looked like life had hardened her completely, something unexpected happened. Something that changed everything. She found out she was pregnant. At first, she was terrified. After all she'd been through, the idea of bringing another life into the world was overwhelming. But soon that fear transformed into purpose. She wasn't just surviving for herself anymore. She had someone to protect someone who needed her. Motherhood awakened something fierce in Leia. It gave her a reason to try again. She poured herself into caring for her son. For the first time in a long time, she talked about going back to school. She dreamed of earning a degree, building a future, giving her child the stability and love she never had. She wanted to break the cycle. But cycles like these don't break so easily. And sometimes, even when someone claws their way out of darkness, fate has one last cruel twist waiting. On the afternoon of February 5th, 2020, the day Leia turned 21, the Roseville, California Police Department received a disturbing emergency call. A young woman had been found seriously injured inside a vehicle parked outside a local fire station. She was barely holding on. The person who had been in the car with her ran into a nearby salon, frantically pleading for help. But by the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. The woman in the vehicle had succumbed to her injuries. That woman was Leia Christian. For investigators, it wasn't a mystery they had to solve from scratch. At nearly the same moment they were responding to the call at the fire station, another 911 call had come through, this time from an apartment complex just 10 minutes away, called Vineyard Gate. Witnesses described a violent confrontation. It started as a verbal argument, but it quickly turned physical, then deadly. Gunfire rang out. People saw cars speeding away from the scene. When police arrived at the complex, they encountered a couple, Brittany Holton and her boyfriend, Jordan Townsend. Both admitted they were involved in the incident, and it didn't take long for Brittany to make a bold claim that she had pulled the trigger, but only in self-defense. 2 people had been shot that day. One, a man, had taken a bullet to the leg. He survived and was treated at a nearby hospital. The other was Leia. She'd been struck in the torso. The wound was fatal. Brittany Holton insisted she had no choice, that the situation had escalated and she had feared for her life. But the details didn't seem to add up, and authorities weren't buying the story. Both Brittany and Jordan were arrested. Brittany was charged with murder. Jordan, although not charged in connection with the shooting itself, was taken into custody on unrelated charges. Still, there were more questions than answers. What exactly happened in that apartment? What caused things to spiral so violently out of control? And how did a young mother, someone trying to rewrite her story, end up bleeding out in the passenger seat of a car on her own birthday? Police stayed quiet on specifics, but one thing was certain. This wasn't just a tragic accident. This was personal, intimate, raw. The kind of killing that feels like it comes from betrayal, not random chance. Surveillance footage later surfaced, showing a man wearing striped pants sprinting into a Sacramento County nail salon shortly after the shooting. Panicked, desperate. That footage would become a key piece of evidence in a case still full of shadows. And as the investigation unfolded, one chilling truth lingered in the air. Leia Christian survived the system, but she didn't survive the people in it. The man burst into the salon, panicked, breathless, wide-eyed with shock. He wasn't from the area and barely spoke English, but the fear in his voice was unmistakable. "My friend's been shot. Please, where's the hospital?" The salon owner, Alex Tran, tried to calm him down and point the way, but then he remembered there was a fire station just across the street. Most days the station looked empty, but by some stroke of luck, someone was there that day. They ran. But by the time help arrived, it was already too late. The woman in the car, 21-year-old Leia Christian, had been shot in the head. She died slumped in the passenger seat, her final moments spent bleeding out in silence, while strangers scrambled to make sense of the chaos. Back at the apartment complex, detectives worked through the scene as stunned neighbors watched. None of it made sense. Why had this young woman who lived in Sacramento been at the Vineyard Gate Apartments in Roseville at all? What brought her there on her birthday? As investigators pieced together the events, both Brittany Holton and Jordan Townsend were arrested. And though they were now sitting behind bars, the story they told the public was very different from what the evidence suggested. From jail, Jordan Townsend spoke out, granting an interview to local media. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, his voice was defensive but flat. He insisted his girlfriend acted only to protect herself. He claimed that when they pulled up to their apartment, they were surprised to find a group of people waiting outside. He thought it was just a drop-off, maybe someone delivering a birthday gift. "I just wish I never went home at that time," he said. "None of this would have happened." Townsend said they went inside. He FaceTimed his father. Brittany, he said, went back to the car to grab her phone. That's when he heard the gunshots. Then, according to him, Brittany came back upstairs, crying, blood trickling from her face. She thought she'd been shot. He said the group had attacked her, and that in defense and because she was pregnant, she pulled out a gun and fired. "My dad told me to call the police," Townsend added. "So I did." He claimed it was the second time he had called 911 for the day. The first, allegedly, was when they saw the group outside. The second came after the shooting. Police, according to him, told Brittany to unload the weapon, put it away, and wait for officers to arrive. But nothing about the story added up. Yes, Brittany Holton was charged with murder, but Jordan Townsend, though not charged in connection to Leia's death, was facing serious accusations of his own. Because of YouTube's guidelines, we can't say exactly what those charges were, but let's just say the initials were HT, and let's be blunt, they involved the exploitation of women for profit. He denied everything, saying law enforcement had no solid evidence against him. "They just wanted to hold me," he said. "Somebody died, so they had to pin something." But when investigators took a closer look, they realized something far darker had happened that day. This wasn't random. This wasn't self-defense. This wasn't an accident. It was premeditated. February 5th, 2020. Leia hadn't gone to the Vineyard Gate Apartments alone. She'd been accompanied by her younger sister and an unidentified male. What started as a confrontation turned into something violent and irreversible. According to multiple sources, the conflict didn't begin with Leia at all. It began with her little sister and Brittany Holton. Somewhere along the line, Leia got pulled in, and once she did, everything escalated. If you knew Leia, this wouldn't surprise you. She wasn't the kind of person to sit back while her family was being threatened. Leia was bold. She was loyal. And she never backed down from protecting her own. Multiple sources, including social media posts and first-hand accounts, suggest that when Leia showed up, she confronted Brittany directly. And the tension exploded. The two fought. Leia was getting the upper hand. Then Brittany snapped. She allegedly grabbed a gun and fired. On that day, Leia's little sister was shot in the leg. She survived, but the physical and emotional scars remain. Leia, however, was struck in the torso, and she didn't make it. Now here's where the story takes another disturbing turn. It was widely claimed that Brittany Holton was pregnant during the incident, a central part of her self-defense claim. But multiple people close to the case later alleged that she wasn't pregnant at all. And what's even more heartbreaking is that Leia might have been. Some say she didn't even know it yet. Again, some of this is unconfirmed. It's hearsay, but it's consistent across multiple sources who knew Leia personally. Let's be clear, violence is never the answer. But what Leia did that day was rooted in love. She showed up not to destroy, but to protect. She was defending her sister. She was standing up for her family. And in doing that, she paid the ultimate price. If someone came for your blood, would you do anything different? Leia Christian was more than a victim. She was a fighter, not just in the physical sense, but emotionally, mentally. She survived a childhood filled with trauma, a broken foster system, an addicted mother she was terrified of losing. At one point in her life, she didn't even want to go on, but she kept going. She rose up. She found purpose. She became a mother herself. She loved fiercely. And in the end, it was that love that cost her everything. February 5th, 2020. Leia should have been dressing up, blowing out candles, posting selfies with her son. Instead, she was bleeding in the passenger seat of a car, her 21st birthday, turning into the final page of her story. Oh, time passed. In 2022, Brittany Holden took a plea deal. She was convicted on a lesser charge and is now serving her sentence at a women's correctional facility in California. She'll be eligible for parole in 2029. As for Jordan Townsend, though he was never held responsible for Leia's death, he remained in jail on those unrelated charges. He wasn't released until 2024. But no sentence, no deal, no courtroom twist can undo what happened. Leia Christian was loved. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a mother who was trying to change the world for her child. And now that child will grow up without her. She didn't get justice. She didn't get to graduate or see her son grow up or escape the pain that followed her from the moment she was born. But here at True Crimes Retells, we will remember her. Rest in peace, Leia Christian. You were fire, even in the storm. Now the question we're left with is this. How many more young people have to be lost before we start listening? Before cries for help are met with real change? And maybe you've asked yourself something similar while watching this. What could have been done differently? What if someone had really listened when Leia said something wasn't right at that group home? What if the people around her had been safe ones? What if she'd had more time? This isn't just Leia's story. It's the story of far too many people whose lives are derailed by systems that fail to protect them, by communities that silence them, and by violence that comes disguised as conflict resolution. And the only way their stories don't get buried is if we refuse to let them. That's what we do here at True Crimes Retells. We don't just tell these stories, we carry them. We speak the names of those the world might forget. We shine a light on the lives lost too soon and the pain left behind. If you felt this story, if it moved you, made you think, made you ache, then be the reason someone else hears it too. Share this video, not just because it helps the channel, but because you never know who might need to hear it. Maybe someone out there will pause before raising a hand, before making a choice that can't be undone. Join us, be a Retell. Not just a viewer, but a voice, a protector of these stories. Someone who believes that no life should end in silence. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss next week's case. We release new, real, and raw true crime stories every single week. And if you found this one as haunting as we did, leave a comment below. What do you think could have changed the outcome of Leia Christian's story? Because together, the more we talk, the less we forget. And maybe, just maybe, someone listens. This is True Crimes Retells. Stay safe, stay aware, and never stop asking the hard questions.